let's get started here. What's up, gang? Tonight we're talking about Donnie Darko again. Now, I covered this with Jim Bob about a year and a half ago, a year and some months, and I thought we should do it again because of all of the. There's a lot of stuff coming out or happening. I don't know if it's coming out, but it's happening. Drones. There's New Jersey drones everywhere. There's portals. Have you ever seen a portal? Burn it to the ground. There's portals. I recently covered Interstellar. We've covered a lot of Jake Gyllenhaal here. Jake Gyllenhaal is a favorite of mine, a favorite of the channel. And of course, you know, he's a 1980 baby like me. So I thought I would cover this one because it deserves a revisit. And I will posit that this film really, at least to me, I don't know about other people, but this film to me really is as worthy of rewatches and deep dives into symbolism and theme as a film like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, I'm not saying the two are on par. They're totally different films, but there are similarities between the two, obviously, with time travel, space travel. And it's the same type of movie. It has the same tone to me as 2001. Now, I've covered 2001: A Space Odyssey. I covered that in the Kubrickon stream. And, of course, again, you can go back and watch my stream with Jim Bob on his channel. I think that's on his website now. But this film is really amazing. And I got to, look, it's made by Richard Kelly. Richard Kelly has made really 3 films. And one of my friends, Liz, shouts out to Liz, what is a camera operator, and she actually worked on The Box, 2009's The Box, which is also set in Virginia. So this film is pretty special to me because it has a few different elements that are kind of close to my heart here. One is that it's filmed in California. Donnie Darko is filmed in California, but it takes place in Virginia. This is indicated, of course, by, it's obvious in the film, but all the license plates are Virginia. The flag of the Commonwealth of Virginia is at the school. It's also, they also go to Middlesex Ridge School, and Middlesex is a stand-in for Richmond or Midlothian. Richard Kelly is from Midlothian, which is on the south side of Richmond. Now, I lived in Midlothian. My family moved to Midlothian after I went off to college, but I spent, a lot of time in Midlothian when I would come back home. So that's about 2000 to 2005. Richard Kelly graduated from Midlow High School in 1993. And the film is set in Middlesex. There's a Middlesex County in Virginia. I taught at a boarding school for a year and lived in Middlesex County. And the newspaper that they show is Middlesex Times-Dispatch. Richmond has the Richmond Times-Dispatch. That's we call it here. We call it the Richmond Times Disgrace. But the film there are a lot of things in this film that are, I don't know if it's maybe that you would have to be. It's set in 1988. But if you would have to be from here, if you'd have to be from the time to understand the movie, it's pretty wild because it's a great period piece and it's completely consistent with the time. One of the examples of that is the creepy curriculum that they have. And this really reminds me of this curriculum that they tried. I mean, I went to private school and he went to Midlothian public school, but there was this creepy curriculum that snuck into one class that I took in first grade. And it was called ORF, ORFF. And I think they still teach this. It's some sort of music methodology. But in ORF class, this made an impact on me because I still remember the songs that we had to learn. This was in first grade. We had this teacher come in, and I called her Miss ORF. It was a stupid word to me. But she taught us these songs. So the songs went like this. One of them was, Umoja, Umoja, means we work together in sunshine, in rain time, in all kinds of weather. We had to do that stupid song. Another one was Ruffles have ridges, Lay's potato chips. We had to learn that song. That was a song we learned. I'll never forget that stupid song. I almost cussed there. I better be careful with the affiliates. But that reminds me of the videos, the type of videos that they have in this, which are these weird VHS tapes for self-help actualization, and attitudinal beliefs, as it's called in the movie. Now, what I think the movie has an endless number of analyses and levels of meaning that come out of it. And I think that it also is one where, take those out, it's also one where you really either love Donnie Darko or you hate it. And this is not surprising to me. I have a yo, what up? Yo, what up, Ruckus? There are a number of different films that fit into this category. One would be Apocalypse Now. People either love Apocalypse Now or they absolutely hate it. They just cannot stand it. Donnie Darko is certainly one of those films. And in the making of Donnie Darko, which I watched today, it's called Deus Ex Machina, the making of Donnie Darko, about, I try to avoid things like that, but I wanted to see what went into some of the concepts in the movie, not necessarily what Richard Kelly has to say about the meaning of the movie, but how it was filmed, because I think it's sort of helps me to glean an understanding of a baseline in terms of the themes. And one of the things that was mentioned was that when the movie was made, it was released in January 2001 at Sundance. They took the film to Sundance, and it went in as the hottest pick. You know, they're trying to gain distribution and distribution funding and rights. And one of the guys, one of the producers, said that Harvey Weinstein showed up to the screening of the movie with a Donnie Darko crew hat on, and that made all of the money people walk out of the room for various reasons. And so it left without distribution. It finally came out in, it came out in October 2001. And then it came out post Big Nine. It was released and then limited, and it was made well before the Big Nine. But it was released in cinemas, a wide release in October 2001, and then it took on a life of its own when it was released in the UK a year later. And I saw this in the cinema. I remember the trailers for the movie, because one of the things that happened when I first, and it's interesting because I saw the trailer when I was back for holiday in Midlothian, where Richard Kelly's from. And one thing that was apparent in the first trailers was that the movie instantly looked to me like it was supposed to be some sort of take on teen movies such as American Pie. Remember that American Pie and TV shows like Freaks and Geeks, which Seth Rogen, I think this is his first film role, is in this movie. It also has the lead singer of Phantom Planet. It plays Richard Greenwald plays the one of the bad guys in the movie. He later was engaged to Brie Larson. Phantom Planet also plays a role in how the movie was developed, because what's his name? Jason Schwartzman, who'd released Rushmore, who was in Rushmore, took an interest in the movie, and that led to Drew Barrymore being interested in being a part of the film. And I think she was there for 2 weeks of the filming, maybe 2 weeks, but actually played a huge role in getting the film financed and in terms of its distribution, because she was a part of it. And then people like Swayze came on. This is one of Swayze's last film roles. And you question why Swayze would be a part of this film, knowing what you know when you watch it. So there's a lot that goes into even the making of the movie. And I think that if you watch, I'm going to be talking about the director's cut and the theatrical cut, because the two are quite distinct. The director's cut either adds a few elements that are sort of ingrained in the theatrical cut, or one could say that it doesn't really add much to the meaning of the film. But it's interesting watching the two. The most obvious thing when you watch the director's cut is how a Tears for Fears song is used at the beginning of the film instead of the Echo and the Bunnymen song, right? The Killing Moon. And the Killing Moon is the perfect song to use at the beginning of the film. Also, Echo and the Bunnymen, and there is a bunny man in the movie. That's what Frank is in the movie. There is a lot. There's Swayze. Swayze passed away, R.I.P., not long after this. But listen, we've covered Point Break. We've covered Bodie. So look, Donnie Darko. I think probably everybody's seen this movie. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. I think this movie is one of the best movies of the last 25 years. I mean, it's to me, I love it, and probably because I've watched it so many times. I watched the movie 3 times in the last 24 hours, so I'm going total Donnie Darko schizo mode with understanding the film, and I really do. It really is a movie that I think appeals to the obsessive people among us, especially me. I mean, this is really the perfect type of movie for me. It's so it's like there's you know it's 1988. It's a month, time travel. Certainly a Gnostic element to the movie. There's the Roberta Sparrow. There's the name etymology. There's the imagery in the movie. And what I will posit for the movie again, my thesis for this go around is that Donnie Darko is probably, bear with me now, but Donnie Darko is probably the hero we need in many ways. And I'm going to get to what that means. Remember that he's called by Gretchen. Gretchen says, Donnie Darko, what kind of a name is that? It sounds like some superhero. And he says, how do you know that I'm not? Well, he might be a superhero. He might be the dark superhero that we need, especially for our time. Now, the movie has obvious predictive elements for Big Nine. That's one of the reasons why the movie didn't do too well when it came out, because it was released just a month after Big Nine. And part of the movie and one of the driving forces in the plot is that an airplane engine falls on a house. Now, I'm going to get to a little later, I think, some of the elements that I covered with Jim Bob, but why this plays into the consciousness of Richard Kelly, the filmmaker. Now, ordinarily, when I go over a movie like this, or a book or a film, I think it's important to let the work stand on its own and not discuss really too much of what might be in the mind of the filmmaker. I think it's irrelevant unless it's on screen. But because I'm only going to make an exception for this one, because Kelly is from here, and because I know some of these things personally, what he's discussing. For instance, the airplane falling on the house was a thing that happened in my neighborhood. It actually happened in my neighborhood. Now, it happened in my neighborhood 40 years before I was born, but it happened twice. An airplane crashed into a house in the neighborhood. And Kelly also, his dad, and this is why this is important now, because we've recently seen that some of the drone sightings, they first took place in January of this year over Langley Air Force Base, which is not Langley, Virginia. It's not CIA. It's Langley Air Force Base, which is across the bridge from Norfolk Naval Weapons Station, the Norfolk Naval Base, the largest naval base in the world. And Kelly's dad actually worked on the Viking rover landing and worked at Langley Air Force Base, which plays a part in The Box. He's filmed The Box in 2009 with Cameron Diaz. Lockerbie. I mean, I think that, we've seen with the drone thing recently, and this, I don't know how this will age, but we'll see what happens with the drone thing. Obviously, I think that the drone thing, I went to it's not really part of the stream, but I did go to, before the revelations of the debunking of the radioactive material thing, I did go to the DARPA website just to see about drones and drone observation and any programs. And there's a drone program at DARPA called Sigma Plus, which has coordinated drone and land-based activity, which scans the horizon and the ground looking for radioactive material. And there was that germanium-88 that was missing or stolen, I don't know, from a thing, but I don't know if that's what they're looking for. It seemed to be that that's what they were looking for, especially that's why they keep appearing at night. But anyway, regardless of any of that, it's sort of irrelevant when we talk about Donnie Darko, except for the fact that people were worried about shooting them down because they would fall on houses. And that is what seems to happen in Donnie Darko, except for we don't know where the engine comes from, except for from a different time. So here's what the movie's about. We see first of all, I'll just say that the sound design is what really gets me in this movie. I've watched the movie with no visuals, just only audio a number of times, and it really is fantastic. It adds a such a layer to the film that is really, I think this is what film really does. It and if anything, it's this movie which adds a subconscious layer to the film, which pushes you in these directions. And there are so many things in the movie. Like I just noticed, I'd never noticed this before. I just noticed that in the scene where Donnie is having one of his hallucinations in the living room watching television, and you hear this scary voice come on television. It's here tonight at Middlesex, which is because it's Halloween season. That when he sees the abyss, and it's taken from it's clearly a nod to the abyss, the solar plexus, destiny bubble, the sort of iridescent water stream that comes out of their chest, which he explains in the philosophy of time travel is a function of these workers. He says he calls them these workers. But that when we first see it with Donnie and his own chest, it pops up and it turns and it beckons him. I never noticed that before. I never noticed that finger beckoning like that. All of the background set is completely consistent. The inconsistencies in the movie and the incongruous things that we see, such as the fact that he lives in a suburban neighborhood, which is very rich. They even got rid of the palm trees in the neighborhood that they filmed in California to make it more Virginian. There's no palm trees like that. Even the neighborhood, which is in the neighborhood of the school, and the school to me, it must be a nod to a school here called St. Edward's, which is a Catholic middle school in Midlothian that has the uniforms of the students, the blue shirt. I just remember that from growing up, that, driving past the school every day, and not every day, but driving past the school all the time and seeing, when I was a kid, and seeing their uniforms. They were, that's a different uniform. I didn't go to a Catholic school, but there was a different school, a different uniform, and it was very distinct in my mind. But one of the incongruous things in the movie is the fact that they go into this like mountain setting, and there's the ranch where Grandma Death lives, Roberta Sparrow. They're driving that old Ford station wagon, and the dad, who looks exactly like George W. Bush, which also plays a role in the movie with George Bush Sr., he's doing that thing in the movies where you're facing the person in shotgun for so long that you stop looking at the road, which is a movie trope. But they almost run over Grandma Death. And then that plays a role in the film after the airplane engine lands, because they are talking about, that actually occurs after this, but the airplane engine occurs before the conversation. But when they show the mom and dad in the hotel room, they are talking about, do you remember Frank, one of our classmates who died on the way to prom? And that's what happens in the film. Frank is the boyfriend of Maggie Gyllenhaal. And you kind of have to put that together in the film. I know that's probably like a first or second viewing noticing, but he's the boyfriend. And also that in the scene, I hadn't noticed that in the scene where Jake Gyllenhaal gets up and says the thing where he calls Patrick Swayze's character, Jim Cunningham, the Antichrist, that in the background when he says, "This is Frank, he's a troubled boy looking for love in all the looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in all the wrong places." When he's looking for nub in all the wrong places, Jim Cunningham refers to Donnie as a very troubled young man who's looking for nub in all the wrong places. And that when we see the drawings, the creepy drawings this guy has, and that illustrate his teaching methodology, we see Frank. He says, "This is Frank." there's another scene in the background where we see Frank in profile with a gun in his hand, right? So we get another reference to the filmmakers were worried about Columbine and references to that, and some of the financiers wanted to cut those scenes from the movie and just make it a movie about a bunny rabbit who is off killing students. Now, this also comes from a local Virginia legend, which I don't know this one because this is more Northern Virginia. This is Nova, but there is a place called Bunny Man Bridge, and there's a local legend. There's an herbal legend here about something called the Bunny Man Bridge, and there are three plus sightings of people being attacked by a guy in a bunny suit. Now, that also plays into the Alice in Wonderland concept in the movie. We have Through the Looking Glass. The characters talk about walking through the looking glass. They say I need to look into the mirror and see my ego. We have Alice in Wonderland with the bunny. They're following the rabbit, not a white rabbit, but a mutant rabbit. And also a Lewis Carroll meta thing here because Jim Cunningham ends up being the creep of all creeps in the movie. And so that's why Donnie Darko ends up being the hero that we need. They are in great danger, he says. Frank says to him, right? Burn it to the ground. Well, is Donnie Darko not a hero here? He also saves the girl. He saves Gretchen, Jenna Malone, who ends up living at the end of the movie, going into the alternate timeline. So here's what happens in the film, just as a rundown, if you don't remember. So we have the film starting with the sound of thunder, and it starts pre-credits. We hear the sound of thunder cracking. We see a skyline, which looks like a green screen, but it's actually filmed, I guess, the Sierras or something. They had 2 days of filming this. The first day they shot it, the Steadicam had a bump in it, so they had to go back the next day and refilm it, and apparently it was even better the second day. And Donnie wakes up in the middle of the road on a mountain. Now, this seems to be where he's dropped at the beginning of his timeline. I'm going to get into what that means in a little bit. But he wakes up, he looks at the skyline, he sees the clouds. Later, he sees a funnel cloud like tornadoes in some sort of weird alternate landscape. And this is going to be matched by the plane crash that happens and the spiral design, of course, on the plane, on the jet engine, which also plays into the Gizapate things in the movie, which are apparent when you watch it and fit the consistency of what happens with Jim Cunningham. So Donnie wakes up in the morning, and it seems that he's a somnambulist. He's a sleepwalker. He gets on his 10-speed. He rides back to the house. We see him entering the neighborhood, and we hear the Tears for Fears song. And what's interesting is that when the first appearance of Frank really is at the beginning of the film when he rides in the neighborhood. We see the red death car drive past him while the lyrics for the Tears for Fears song match up. It's this. I'm sorry. This is the Echo in the Bunny Moon, Killing Moon. In the director's cut, it's Tears for Fears. But both times the lyrics match up to basically this is death approaching, and we also realize that this is where later on in the film we realize Frank has just dropped off Donnie's sister, Maggie Gyllenhaal, and we can hear him honking in the background. It's immediately after this. So he gets home, and this is where we have a weird timeline blip, because later on we know that when Donnie wakes up, he's not there for the jet engine to fall through his bedroom, but in the end of the film, he goes back home and he's there to merge with this jet engine coming into his bedroom, and that starts this whole timeline over again. It seems that in the director's cut, this is supported by the tangent universe in the philosophy of time travel that Roberta Sparrow writes. But what happens here is Donnie goes home, he walks through, we see his dad who looks like George W. Bush, like he's blowing the leaves in the front. The Maggie Gyllenhaal walks out. She's going to take the car. We see the little sister jumping on the trampoline, which also appears like an eye or a portal. And we see him walk past his mother. His mother is reading the book It by Stephen King and smoking a cigarette outside. That also plays into, it's consistent with the rest of the film, because if Creeper It is hiding in sewers, then Creeper It, Jim Cunningham, is hiding in plain sight, but doing the same thing. And we also literally see it pop up later in the film, at the end of the film, when we see the red car appear with Frank get out of the car in his bunny suit before he gets shot in the eye, which causes we see the one eye symbolism there. And it's the reason why he is death coming back to Donnie. But we see that his passenger is dressed in a clown suit. He's an It. And Donnie walks in and he sees printed on the refrigerator, "Where is Donnie?" Has anybody seen Donnie? Next thing is we see the family eating dinner, and they are eating pizza. There's the Gizza Pate. And we see sort of a talk of a liberal family talk here in terms of discussion, because Maggie Gyllenhaal says that this is a conservative family in Virginia, but the way that they do things seems to be liberal. And she says she's voting for Dukakis. Now, I remember the Dukakis Bush election very clearly. I was 8 years old, and I remember this because I was conscious of Ronald Reagan being president right away when I was born. The best years of my life. No, I loved Reagan when I was a kid. When I was a little kid, I just did. That was the thing. And we even had a dog named Ollie after Oliver North. and anyway, so I remember the Bush Dukakis. I think Bush and Dukakis even debated at University of Richmond. I remember that clearly. I also remember afterwards, one of my friends, when I went to school, saying that he voted for Dukakis. Of course, we were 8 years old. But my friend saying he voted for Dukakis, and I was like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" I was so pissed. So anyway, so she says she would vote for Dukakis, and it's interesting because we see the dad says, "Well, maybe one day when you are older and half of your husband's paycheck goes to the orthodontist to affording braces for your child, you'll understand." And she says, "Oh, my husband's paycheck." And the mother says, "Oh," but then the mother jumps in and says, "Do you really think that this man is going to create a country, help you provide for a world where, you'll be able to do the things you do?" She's taking a year off. She's taking what you call a gap year. Now, it's not really a gap year. People in this country think that there's a thing called a gap year. Gap year is really for the English and for the UK. Gap year really is where you take a year off after your A levels and you go and do charity somewhere. But she thinks she's taking a gap year, I suppose. But it's actually just a party, and she hadn't gotten into Harvard yet, which her mother says she'll be going to Harvard next year. Anyway, they make a comment about, she says she's not gonna push one out until she's about 30. The little sister, Samantha, says, "What does this mean?" And Donnie chimes in with, "Maybe one day, that's because mom and dad don't pay $200 an hour to a therapist to listen to you talk about your problems," right? And he does his thing that he does. He does his little thing that he does in a lot of his movies. That's a pure Jake Gyllenhaal thing with his ears. But you see the dynamic here by having this actual brother and sister in the cast in the film as brother and sister. I think that's pretty good. I really like how they did that. And there are a number of things, by the way, with the little sister, Samantha. Did you know that the actress who plays Donnie Darko's little sister in this movie was the voice of Lilo in Lilo and Stitch? Did you know that? She was also the Ring girl. Have you seen Ring? Ringu! Ringu! Monsieur Kaku! Monsieur Kaku! Time portals! Well, she was Ring. She was the Ring girl. And there is a recent thing with that dude named D. Piddly. who at the MTV Movie Awards, when she won Most Terrifying Villain over Daniel Day-Lewis and all these people, it's the MTV Movie Awards. She was just a little girl, and D. Piddly said on camera, which has now come back, "Oh, I'll see you at the after party." Did you know that? Did you know that? Motherfucker. So anyway, so D. Piddly, and that actually plays a role in the film because Sparkle Motion, which is Samantha Darko's girl pop group, is promoted by Jim Cunningham and is performing while Kitty Farmer, hello, the G-Max woman, who's the disgusting woman who gets the book banned, methinks the lady doth protest too much about banning the books, and Prawn, while she seems to be the farmer for Samantha. Now, the other thing I will say about this movie is it seems obvious now that Donnie is a victim of either Jim Cunningham himself or something like it in the film. And I say this because he has, first of all, he is a paranoid schizophrenic. He has visions. He seems to have, I don't know the clinical diagnosis, but he seems to have DID. I mean, he dissociates, and Jake Gyllenhaal is a very, very good actor in this. And there's one scene in particular, which I posted on Instagram, which really illustrates how great he is. And that is his physical changes when he is contacting Frank. He becomes a different person. And we've seen this throughout looking at serial killers and people with DID and the physical changes. The most notable example is what the prosecutor said of Ted Bundy. Now, Donnie Darko is not the Ted Bundy character in this, but he does seem to dissociate completely. Now, the question is whether Donnie is a time traveler stuck in an infinite loop here, which he's trying to get out of, or whether he is inhabited by Frank, who is the guy coming from the future, or whether he's possessed, or whether he is simply some sort of Gnostic archon. I think all of the above are pretty valid, but these questions seem to be answered when you go through the rest of the film because of there are so many scenes in this which seem to be incongruous. Like, for instance, with the girl, go back to China, bitch. That girl, right? Charita or whatever. She's listening to Donnie talk to Noah Wiley outside of the classroom. She has the fan book of Donnie Darko, and there's a weird thing when the friends are talking in the woods about the Smurfs and how Smurfette's role in the Smurf village, because they're talking about the Smurfettes, the Smurfs, and Donnie corrects them on the meaning of the Smurfs and how Smurfette was sent in by Gargamel to infiltrate the Smurfs, and she ends up converting to the Smurf way of life because the Smurfs are wholesome. And that is not something, it's not an anomaly in the film. Obviously, it shows a number of things. It shows that Donnie has a high IQ way of looking at, of analyzing pop culture and various, the symbolism in various paradigms, but also, what is it? Who's the infiltrator in the movie? What does it say about who is the infiltrator? Now, when we look at the living receiver, we're going to see that Donnie's a living receiver. But is it saying that Jenna Malone is Smurfette, or is it saying that the Charita girl is Smurfette, or is it saying simply that Donnie is thrown into a situation that he was sent to infiltrate? This becomes apparent in the director's cut because of the crash screens. If you remember the programming crash screens, which don't appear in the original, but look at this. This is something I became obsessed with watching the movie. So when we look at the screens here, whenever Donnie is falling out, crashing out, or becoming Frank, we see that there is some kind of computerized programming code error that appears on the screen. We see various images in the corners. Now, we have a programming code there, which I'm going to get into in a second. We also see his eyeball mixed with an inverted landscape. There is metal and water, which we're going to look at when we talk about the philosophy of time travel. And there is the programming code. So look at this one right here. This one's also crazy. This is the scene that occurs when he goes to Jim Cunningham's house to burn it down. In other words, there is a second party here, not just in Donnie's head, but something completely external. And the question is whether this is Frank inside Donnie as a kind of carrier, as a host, accomplishing some sort of mission. And what's really weird here, there's also Watership Down. Watership Down plays a role in this. And this seems to be, yes, I think one of the easiest explanations of the movie is that it is sim theory, that it's a simulation with a tangent universe run by someone or something from the future. But what I think is really wild here is that, let me get back here. What I think is really wild is that none of that appears in the theatrical cut. They cut all that out, but it actually doesn't change the story. And Watership Down, of course, Richard Kelly said that why did I choose the bunny costume? Well, for no reason apparently. It was just he had been reading Watership Down in high school. A lot of this is like works from his high school reading list. So we have Sartre with no accent. We have Graham Greene's The Destructors. We have, of course, It, which would be popular reading at the time. And we also have Watership Down. Watership Down is what takes the place of the Graham Greene book in the movie when it's banned. And, of course, Watership Down deals with destructive influences in an allegorical society with a bunny. We also have, of course, Alice in Wonderland. And the first time that we see Frank, he's actually standing next to a red flag on the links. We also see Donnie going. Okay, so going back to the way the film, in terms of the linear narrative here, which actually ends up being non-linear or a kind of gyre, a kind of turning and turning in the widening gyre. We see a sort of infinite loop here in terms of history, which fits with the simulation code. But so we see Donnie wake up. I've been watching you. Now, the fact that we have the externalized Frank here is obviously reminiscent of The Shining. And actually what happens here is when Donnie wakes up from his sleep and after he's called his mom a bitch, and the dad says, I don't think you're a bitch, I think you're a bitchin', and goes downstairs, he walks out and we see a kind of maze garden. It's actually just the front of the house, but the way that the box bushes are arranged, it appears that Frank is at the end of the maze. So we see him follow Frank, and Frank has told him in an external sense, I've been watching you. Now, this plays in with The Shining because remember that Tony is the little boy that lives in Danny's mouth, which I think that The Shining is it's completely now obvious when I watch the movie that Danny has the Shining, the telekinetic fire starter. Drew Barrymore's in this movie, pyrokinetic abilities that he does, this sort of mind reading and future vision, like a Geller kid or like a Montauk project, because he has been creeped by Jack Torrance. It seems obvious when you watch it now. And so he's developed an external, an internal personality alter that he externalizes, which is vindicated in the Shining film when he comes across the Gemini twin girls, who are external versions of Danny and Tony. Remember that Donnie actually does axe. He uses an axe in one of his first missions here, and his mission is not an intermission, right? His mission is that he goes to the school and he axes the water main and floods the schools. The flooding seems to be biblically allegorical for the destruction of what has been occurring under the surface through the school, through Jim Cunningham. We see Jim Cunningham at first appear when we have an inverted camera movement with the Tears for Fears when Donnie gets to school and has this sort of MTV sequence walking through the school, and we see all the various characters. And one thing that I think this is really interesting in the movie. The camera work is amazing in the movie because when they made the movie, the director of photography discussed with Richard Kelly how difficult it would be to have the sequence with the Tears for Fears song. He actually had him walk through the school and time it, and it was longer than the Tears for Fears sequence that they've been given the rights to. And so they had to do something different with this. He wanted it all in one Steadicam shot, and he couldn't get it. But instead, so what he did was he had multiple shots and with cameramen hiding behind doors, and they would take each other's place when they're going through the sequence. And the studio was worried that it would be too much of an MTV montage, which is interesting because Phantom Planet, the guys, one of the bad guys is Phantom Planet, and we see Seth Rogen appear for the first time. The two guys are doing bumps in the fucking hallway of the school with this dumbass principal just walking past. And then we see the outside with the mongrel. I got to get to the mongrel in a second because I got a story that deals with this mongrel character. And we see Jim Cunningham, who's Patrick Swayze. And what's weird about the Patrick Swayze character is that he seems in the movie like he's a guest. Like he seems like he pops up and he's doing some sort of paid, like he's got a contract to do work at the school, doing this weird new age teaching methodology. But he actually is a local. He lives in this giant Tudor mansion that Donnie walks past every day, and we know that he's permanent there because of what we find at the end of the movie in his dungeon, in his back room. So the question is, when we see some of his training some of his video sequences, first of all, Patrick Swayze appears on the screen, and we get we get a horse. Why is the horse sounding every time he appears on the screen? Is this because this is a stable? Is it because he has a stable of, he's a creep, he's got a creep stable. And we've got one of the people that appears in the, first of all, there's 4 screens on the TV screen, and that's sort of ties in with the video screen crash sequence that we see with Donnie, but this is in real time. And we see these clearly damaged people, and one of them is this older woman that says that she has chosen to rid herself of fear, and so she looks into the mirror. So she's going through the looking glass, a la Alice in Wonderland. Except when she's going through the mirror, she's actually diving back into her psyche where she experienced the fear of all fears, which would be the Drino fear of Jim Cunningham in his dungeon. We see this little kid appear, and he says, I'm not afraid anymore. Well, later, that kid appears in the auditorium when Jim Cunningham calls the people down to the stage, and he's the one who says, I don't want to be afraid anymore. That's the same kid. And then he calls him down to the stage to be put on display with the other 2 kids. Now, that's the scene where Donnie really displays when he calls Patrick Swayze the Antichrist in that scene, when I first watched the movie back when I was 20, that scene really bothered me because and it was in the trailer. I didn't like the sort of loose terminology there by this teenager. I thought that was weak. I thought, okay, is this just going to be another? This is the way they portray an angsty teenager. And then I got to a point where I realized, no, he's actually telling the absolute truth here that Jim Cunningham is a kind of Antichrist archetype. He's actually promoting every single thing wrong with the world, which is why the psychiatrist is later going to say that Donnie is incapable of coming to terms with events outside of himself. And so he has developed this kind of paranoid schizophrenia, which the question is, I mean, is he a paranoid schizo? He's certainly a TI. He's certainly this movie, if you ever look at TIs in movies, this is really one. He really is the targeted individual in the film. So the school is flooded, and there's no school. I'm kind of going back and forth here, but we see him at the bus stop talking to his friends. He's got these two friends that aren't really. They're kind of ancillary. They're supposed to be his friends, but they're not. And that's when the kid, he says, "Yeah, smoke a cigarette." And the guy goes, "That's good shit." And he says, "Yeah, it's a fucking cigarette." And that's when he says the thing to Charita. But Donnie actually sticks up for the girl. In a later sequence, when they're standing at the bus stop, we see Samantha with her short story where she's talking about Ariel, the unicorn. And so we see a kind of fairy tale Disney version of events from a youthful mind that's underlying the rest of the movie, which is interesting because Donnie will continuously regress. He infantilizes and regresses whenever he talks to Donnie. Now, I read an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal where he said that was a conscious choice, and he said that it was his choice to do that because he wanted to talk to to Frank, like he was a child, with a blanket, like that's his safety blanket. But that speaks to, in terms of our analysis, that speaks to his regression and his alter personality. And so we also see this come out when he's talking to the psychiatrist, whose name, by the way, is Dr. Thurman. Thurman Merman, are you fucking with me? Dr. Thurman, played by Catherine Ross, who is very, very pretty. I love this psychiatrist, therapist woman. I've always liked her in this movie. I actually covered another movie she was in when we did that stream with Mark Hackard. She's in that movie as a younger actress, but she's a beautiful woman. God, I really love this woman. Also, Drew Barrymore in this movie is very pretty. I think this is probably Drew Barrymore's best role, and she's so pretty in the movie. It also adds a provenance because she's Firestarter. Now, I recently talked about Firestarter. I've done a whole stream on Firestarter and Stargate Monarch, but I also talked about it in terms of Geller Kids with Jamie on our recent stream over on her channel. And she is, she adds a kind of provenance to in terms of dissociation, and one of the really MK Ultra, like the movie's not an MK Ultra movie, but it could be. It very well could be, because do you remember where they have there's the scene where Donnie is talking, he's with Jenna Malone, and they have to do this like science presentation, and they create these glasses. Do you remember this scene? It's kind of forgotten in the movie, but there's a scene where they've drawn this MC Escher type of drawing. He's got an MC Escher eye, an all-seeing eye next to his bed before his parents completely change his bedroom, which is crazy in the movie because I'll also get to that. But they draw this MC Escher sort of drawing of an infant with these glasses on, these sort of 3D glasses, and their science project basically says that they think they can develop a way of showing images, peaceful images to children, to implant peace for their later years. And this is this is a really weird scene. You can imagine, obviously, that Donnie is the idea for this, but Is Jenna Malone also a kind of living receiver in the movie? Because remember, her character shows up and she's there under an assumed name because her dad stabbed her mom 4 times in the chest and then ran away. So we got this whole backstory with her. And at the end of the movie, she is the one who is, she's killed at the end of the movie or run over. And Donnie takes her body up to the mountaintop to drop her off, where I assume she will be the one who's taken out of the time loop and put back in at the beginning of the next sequence, because the movie ends with her showing up on a bike in front of the house and waving at the mother like like she remembers something from the Tangent universe, but she doesn't. Jenna Malone doesn't remember, but Donnie is gone and she doesn't even remember Donnie. So Donnie has, I assume, sacrificed himself for Jenna Malone in this, but does that make her a kind of living receiver? It's very strange. Yeah, we don't. Yeah. So Nightshade right there says it's interesting that we never learned Gretchen's real name. It is interesting. She says she's under an assumed name. She's under a false name, and we never learned her name. Now, I read theories that Gretchen is actually Grandma Death. Grandma Death is Roberta Sparrow in the movie, and Roberta Sparrow is this character who lives in a house up the road, which is totally a different universe than Donnie Darko is set in. Because again, it's like this totally rural landscape up in the mountains, and that just doesn't exist like around actual Middlesex, Virginia, or actual Midlothian or Richmond. You have to go about an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to any kind of mountains like that. And even then, it's like she lives like on a ranch. So when we see Grandma Death, we see Jake Gyllenhaal shooting out glasses, which is also crazy because the soundscape in this. I was going to mention earlier that when we take the sequence through the high school, and one thing about the camera work in this, which is interesting, is that, and I think this is important in the film, is that there is a continuous speeding up and slowing into slow motion in the film. And to me, that is not just a film trick. It's not just something MTV like in the film. To me, that is showing that Donnie seems to be in control of time, or that Frank inside of Donnie is speeding up and slowing down time, or at least how he sees things in this simulation, if it's a simulation. I mean, look at the montage. Look at the scene when he walks through the high school hallway. Look at the sparkle motion scene, how it's slowed down. It's very strange. But there also the camera work and the sound effect and the soundscape in the movie, there are so many subtle little clues here, like the sound of the glass breaking, the continuous looking into mirrors, the scene that I posted where he's looking in the mirror and we hear the snap of his, it sounds like a psychic snap. He's snapping back into Donnie from Frank. So he's sort of transcending from one altar to another. The word transcend is mentioned in the movie when Maria Farmer, we get a future meta thing with Maria Farmer here, and we also get the Kitty Farmer thing that I just mentioned. She says she is the only teacher here who transcends the parent-teacher bridge. Why does she say bridge? It's a strange and deliberate word that she uses in the script, and that also ties in with the fear and love dialectic that is pushed in the classroom when they're doing the Cunningham attitudinal beliefs method, fear and love, which are not dialectical. It's obvious, and Donnie tries to point this out, I think, the best he can, which is that there's a whole spectrum. There's a whole spectrum of human emotions that plays into the middle of these things, and the things aren't complex. Also, the scenario that he's presented with, which is a drawing of Frank, but the scenario he's presented with is that he finds a wallet and he doesn't return the money. Well, he later finds the wallet of Jim Cunningham in front of the house, which he doesn't return. Yeah, the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which they talk about, which is a trope they do in every film. It actually works in this movie, but this movie and Deja Vu and The Abyss all sort of exist in the same universe, where we have uh, uh, the Abyss is the water alien, which ties in with the recent events with the drones, but the kind of water aliens or fallen archons, fallen angels in the Abyss, which I've covered, but also um, the the trope is that in every single movie where there's time travel, they always have to explain, oh, you take a sheet of paper and you fold it up and you put the pencil in the middle and there's your wormhole. Like, we don't need that anymore. But it works in this because he's explaining to a child, so it's fine. It works in this movie. And Noah Wiley, who is an interesting character in this movie, he's a side character, but he's in a relationship with Drew Barrymore, and they seem to function as Drew Barrymore. These two characters don't seem to be the manipulated living. The psychiatrist is one of the manipulated living characters, which is mentioned in the philosophy of time travel. But the bridge is interesting because obviously fear and love are not opposites. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? The greatest of these is love. Sometimes fear and love are coincide. I think they should have used, and they use it on purpose and it works. But what we're supposed to assume is that it would be terror and love, and the terror, which is the Jim Cunningham, is the one crossing the bridge from love to terror, because the love in this masquerades as love, but is actually pure terror. When we see Donnie wake up on the golf course again, we see him. We see a POV shot of him looking up, and we see the sun. We see the sun, and we see his friend's dad, the surgeon, call him son. And then we see Jim Cunningham take the place of the son in the shot, and again call him son. He continuously refers to him as son in the movie, like to a weird degree, like as if he is some sort of creep father figure for Donnie Darko. And that's why I think that Donnie Darko's character is trying to get back to the center of his labyrinthine mind after undergoing something that nobody else in the film in his family is aware of. His mother seems to, I don't know what his mother does, but it's weird that when he gets back home after that scene, also he says get off the links. It's like a link to the past and the future here. When Donnie gets back to his house and he sees that the jet engine has fallen and they don't know where the engine came from, the FAA appears and walks up to the mother instead of the father. It's a very weird scene. The mother also is the one who drives a Porsche that we never see driven in the movie, but it's her. The dad is the one driving the station wagon. And we see also this red tracksuited smoking fat guy who appears in two different scenes, who I assume is a spy from the FAA, making sure that they are that they have fidelity with their FAA, their non-disclosure agreement that they sign with the FAA, because they get sent to a Holiday Inn, and they're told that the FAA will take care of everything, but they can't talk about it, so they sign an NDA. But when they're in the Holiday Inn, we see the dad and the mom lying in the hotel room, and the dad. This is a wild scene. Also, the dad is looking off into the distance like he is dissociated, and he says the thing about, "Do you remember Frank, the guy who died when we were young, going to the prom?" So we have this sort of time loop lineage with the children reenacting the things from their parents' past. We see Roberta Sparrow, who they say was a nun and then became a scientist, wrote the philosophy of time travel, and worked at the school. And the picture of her that Donnie sees, because Donnie, this is a small touch in the movie, that Donnie actually, when he hears the name Roberta Sparrow and he finds out that, and he's given the book by Noah Wiley, and Noah Wiley tells him, I can't continue this conversation, which is so, there's a whole other subplot here dealing with how teachers involved, are involved with the education, the banning of the actual work of literature, because Maria Farmer, Kitty Farmer, is protesting too much, right? Because she is the Kitty Farmer. We see Roberta Sparrow walking back and forth to the mailbox looking for something she's been waiting for a long time. And it seems to be consistent with a theory that she would be Jenna Malone waiting in this time loop for Donnie to show back up. It's very strange. She tells him that every living creature dies alone. And then that's when Donnie goes off talking to the psychiatrist about how he doesn't want to be alone anymore, which is weird also because he is in many ways not alone in this. He has Frank inhabiting him. There's also the scene where, he's asleep. The dad has gone downstairs to watch the tape, the video replay of the debate between Dukakis and George Bush. This is a famous debate where Dukakis says he will not involve the government in money laundering schemes with drug dealers, talking about Manuel Noriega. Now, I remember the invasion of Panama because I was in, what was I in? I must have been in second grade. I was in Miss Sand's class, and my friend Morgan came in, and he had been to the Aerosmith Skid Row concert the night before. It's where Aerosmith sang the song Angel. I remember Morgan describing this. They sang the song Angel, and an angel, appeared from the top of the stadium. You're my angel, came down. But before that, Skid Row opened, and he said, Sebastian Bach, I remember him telling me this at school. He said, Sebastian Bach last night, it was the night of the invasion, and he said, this song goes out to that taco-eating son of a bitch, Manuel Noriega. It's called Youth Gone Wild. And then, of course, Manuel Noriega, they had that bullshit about, we got Noriega out of his mansion because they flew helicopters around the house playing Metallica and Red Hot Chili Peppers. Give me a fucking break. Like that would drive you out of your mansion. What they were probably doing, I'm just speculating on this, but what I assume they were doing was hooking up speakers and playing ELF frequency, ultra high frequency, ultra low frequency, and the typical MK Ultra sounds of bunnies. It's one of the things that they always play. Bunnies. They play the sounds of bunnies and pigs being massacred and the sounds of babies crying, which is sure to drive you insane and probably result in him coming out. But anyway, so George Bush it's the one where George Bush said, I went down there to Panama and I talked to Noriega and about his money laundering. And he assured me that he was not doing that. And then he invades. Right? Because Manuel Noriega was, of course, a CIA asset during Iran-Contra and we remember the Panama Papers that came out a few years ago. So anyway, but the dad is sitting in the chair and says, tell him, George, son of a bitch, Dukakis. I think Dukakis' downfall in that election was when he appeared in a tank. There's something about him in a tank. I don't remember that one because I didn't see it on TV, so I don't remember that one. Yeah, Dan Quayle later on went on to work for my dad, one of my friend's dad's hedge fund in New York, but he got squashed later on. Remember he got squashed in that one because they wanted the big thing they used to him was he couldn't spell tomato. He spelled tomato with an E or something like that. Such bullshit. Anyway, so Dan Quayle and Bush. I remember a neighbor of mine had a bumper sticker with Quayle Bush on it, and I remember thinking there's a quail in the bush, which is what an 8-year-old would think, I guess. So that's when anyway Danny goes out on one of his missions here, and he puts the remember that he puts the axe in the head of the mongrel, which is the school mascot, and they say, "How could this happen? And this is solid brass," which is crazy because then later on, Jenna Malone says to him, "Oh, how do you know about? It sounds like a superhero name, and it does sound like a superhero name. And how do we know that he's not?" Now, speaking of mongrel, let me tell you this story real quick. And by the way, if you want to smash that like, please smash that like. Also, you can support. Please think about supporting the stream. I would certainly really appreciate it. I'm going on a Christmas trip tomorrow, late tomorrow night, and it would help me out to get there. If you can support me here, you can support me at the links that I'm providing right now in the chat. You can also see them later in the video description. You can see them now in the video description. You can see them, of course, in the channel description. And you can also super chat. Now, super chats don't get to me for about a month, but that would be great if you want to super chat also. That would I would really appreciate that. So here's my story about mongrel. So the mongrel in this has filed down teeth. It's like a little bulldog sitting there with filed down teeth. Now listen, here's my story. Okay. So late last week, I sneezed so hard. This is so stupid. I sneezed so hard that I heard a pop. And I immediately went, ah, and I went back in pain. And I thought, oh, that's my rib, either my rib broke or a muscle between my ribs broke. And so anyway, I just said, fuck it. And I just, a few days went by and I was in agonizing pain. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but I was in agonizing pain with my stomach muscle on my left side. And finally, I ended up going to the hospital to get it checked out because I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't be on a plane like that. I couldn't sneeze or cough or laugh or talk. And then I got a fever because of it. And I never go. I hate going to doctors. I hate all that shit. I never do any of that shit. But finally I had to go. So I went to the hospital. So we walked in the hospital here, very clean, very, very nice. And there was, hey, thank you so much. Who's that? Ortho Boomer Grandma. Thank you for that $20 super chat. Really appreciate you. And if you support, I will be reading the super chats near the end, unless they pop up here on super chats, and I'll try to get to them. Thank you so much. Thanks, OBG. Really appreciate you there. Thank you. Merry Christmas. So I walked in. It was very clean hospital that's like 2 minutes away. And there was no one in there, and it was like, okay. So I walk in, and then all of a sudden, these two giant black guys appear with this guy in between them. And then I hear the nurse come out, and the nurse goes, if he got a spit, he can do it right over there. And I look over, and this mongrel is sitting in a chair, white guy, totally bald head, teeth filed into vampire points, with blood coming out of his mouth and on his shirt. And he's just, bah! And so I look over at him, and he's about 10 feet away in a chair, and I look at him, and he literally goes, bah! And blood was just spitting out of his mouth onto his chest. And then the nurse goes, okay, we ain't gonna have that. And this guy literally, he goes, ah! 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 Like screaming like this. And the funny part was he ran to the door and he goes, ah! And he waited for the door to go, and then he goes, ah! 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 And ran. His hands were like this. He runs out the parking lot. The cops from the hospital came out and they go, where is he? Where is he? And they go, he out in the parking lot spitting blood all over the cars. And they go, okay. And he's going, ah! 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 So then we got a private waiting room, and I was sitting there, and I heard inside the hospital, ah! 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 So, and I said, well, listen, I'm not going to make fun of that guy, because people like that, I think, are, I think people with the condition that I assume, I think, are closer to God. But when he started spitting blood and screaming, I went, okay, well, this is something to be remarked on. So anyway, I was only there for about 3 hours. I got a CAT scan. It was fine. And then they gave me that sweet, sweet hot shot. So I got the good. I got the good, but you still good. I got that good. And then ever since then, I've been pretty fine. So everything's cool. Hey, yo, thank you, Melly. Thank you, Melly. Thank you, Meliforta, for that $10. Yo, shouts out to Melly right there. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate you. And also, before I go on, I got a couple of books here that I'm going to be reading over Christmas, and I'll be doing streams on soon. One of them is one of the final, I think this is the final Bret Easton Ellis book that we haven't covered. We've done Glamorama, American Psycho, Less Than Zero, The Informers, The Shards, Lunar Park. I've talked about, what's the other one? With the movie that came out. I forget the name of it. But I've talked about all the, I've done streams on all the Bret Easton Ellis. This is the final one, I think. And this is Imperial Bedrooms. So I'll be reading this over the break. Also, shouts out to my mom and dad here. I also got the Wasteland, a biography of a poem. This is the book that my cousin, who's brilliant, just recommended on the how the Wasteland came to be. And this is really the story and the analysis of the Wasteland in terms of its construction, about Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot. This is a pretty massive book, so I'll be delving into that. And then finally, I also got, I haven't even unwrapped it yet, and this is Stephen Kinzer's Poisoner in Chief about Sidney Gottlieb. So this is real MK Ultra, MK Delta, MK Naomi, MK Often stuff. So I'll be covering that. Also, if you want to see more about drones, then you can go back to my drone stream that I did privatize. I put it in the members stream, but in the VIP section, but then I took it back out because of all the stuff that's happening now. And that was an analysis of the drone book that I read by, what's his name? Ian H.R. What's his name? Forget the name of the drone book. Full Spectrum Dominance, Drone Warfare. So you can check that out. So anyway. So Donnie ends up having a love interest. He ends up going out with Jenna Malone, who's Gretchen in the film. And there are a number of different scenes here. I mean, every scene I think is integral to the plot line as a whole and to the themes. But where this really takes a turn is when he is in the bathroom at home. And what's weird here is that he's looking in the bathroom mirror. He takes his schizophrenia medication, his SSRIs, but actually he's reversed to the mirror. You can see the bathroom mirror behind him, and this is the water wall. And this is where he says, "How do you do that?" And Frank says to him, He says, "I can do anything I want. So can you." And he puts his hand up to the rippling time mirror, and he sees Frank on the other side, truly on the other side, and you notice how his physiognomy changes from being here to being here. He squunches up, he infantilizes in this scene till his sister snaps, literally, we hear a snaps him out of it, and then we see him, of course, in the psychiatrist's office or the therapist's office, talking about what he's doing, how he found the gun in his dad's closet. In the house, there's a room. In the room, there's a closet. In the closet, there's a box. In the box, there's a paper. In the paper is a thing, and that's where the gun is. So he finds the gun, and he lies about it to the therapist. And then we see him go on the date. When he goes on the date with Jenna Malone, he goes to the Arrow Theater, and he sees a screening of Evil Dead. Now, originally this was supposed to be Chud, but it's actually Evil Dead with The Last Temptation of Christ, putting a kind of contextual spin on what's happening in the movie. And we see that this is supposed to give you a kind of end of the cycle of of the satanic panic happening in the 80s with the moral indignation of the film. And I'm not seeing that movie. I'm not seeing Scorsese's movie with Willem Dafoe. I've never seen the movie. I'm not going to see it. I just know it's going to piss me off. So I'm not going to see that movie. But I understand what it's doing here. And they're in the theater alone. The way the scene is set up is the shadows on the wall almost appear like altars watching him or like bunnies. And then Jenna Malone falls asleep, and we see Frank reveal himself as Frank, who is Maggie Gyllenhaal's boyfriend in the movie. But this is when he says, "Have you ever seen a portal?" And a portal opens up through the clock in the screening of Evil Dead, mixed in with the slamming sounds against the door, knocking on the door. His altar is knocking on the door of his psyche. And we see the portal open up through the clock after, this is after he's been given his time deadline, kind of like Lost, kind of like the show Lost. This is when the world will end 28 days. He's written on his arm. And the portal opens up and we see Jim Cunningham's Tudor-style mansion. He says, "They are in great danger. Burn it to the ground." So now he walks out of the cinema. He goes to Jim Cunningham's house. We see him inside. There's a weird Sylvester Stallone-looking portrait, kind of a Kramer / Sylvester Stallone-looking portrait of Patrick Swayze, and he burns the house down. Now, the next day, we see the news, and unearthed in the ashes is the fact that Jim Cunningham had an Adreno creep dungeon in his house, and he is unearthed as the villain. This is after the talent show, after Jim Cunningham was hosting the talent show with Sparkle Motion, and this sends Samantha Darko and his mom off to California to participate in Star Search. Now, when they're on the plane back, this is going to lead to us realizing that the plane crash is involving the plane that his very mother and sister are on, the jet engine falling out of the time portal into his bedroom. And in the meantime, Donnie, who dresses up in a skeleton outfit like Johnny in Karate Kid, sees Jenna Malone, Gretchen. They end up going over to Grandma Death's house. Now, when they get there, this is because Drew Barrymore's character has said that cellar door, which is written on the blackboard, is the most beautiful phrase. She gives it to a linguist. It's J.R.R. Tolkien says cellar door. I've never liked that phrase. I've never liked that about that, because we can't get it away from the fact that when we say cellar door and we notice the beauty of the euphony of the phrase, it also derivates from the obvious meaning of the word and the cellar door. And in the context of the movie, the cellar door is both where they're going to walk into Roberta Sparrow's house, but also, in a sense, where they find Jim Cunningham's cachet. They get up to the house. Now, this has been foreshadowed in the movie because the dad says that when he was younger, people would go up to Roberta Sparrow's house and they would, she had a collection of gems and gemstones, and they would try to steal from her because she was a rich woman. So we see Seth Rogen and what's his name, the other bad guy up there trying to loot her house. Donnie protects his girlfriend, who then gets knocked out and lies in the middle of the road. Here comes the red death car, swerving out of the way of Roberta Sparrow and hitting Jenna Malone, which then leads to Donnie pulling out his strap and smoking the Frank character just where he has foreseen and which was foreshadowed. He then carries her like a superhero back to the house, gets in the car, takes her up the mountain, and leaves her there, which leads to him going back home and being united, in a sense, with this jet engine, which leads to the new timeline of Jenna Malone showing up and not knowing who Donnie was. And that's the end of the film. So I wanted to go through a couple things here in terms of the lore of Donnie Darko and some just interesting things that I found looking into this because of the whole Donnie Darko universe. So this is Donnie Darko and the philosophy of time travel. This is in the Donnie Darko Tangent Universe website, and this is philosophy of time travel. So I'm going to take you some of the things in the director's cut that appear in the film these are cut out of the theatrical cut. It says these are the pages from the fictional book, The Philosophy of Time Travel by Roberta Sparrow. Let me copy it here so you can check it out if you want to. Because I can't show it on the screen because I am a total and so I am incapable of showing this here if I'm not on StreamYard. So this says, I would like to thank the Sisters of the St. John Chapel in Alexandria, Virginia, for their support in my decision. By the grace of God, they are, and then she names 7 sisters because she was a nun. This intent of the short book is for it to be used as a simple and direct guide in a time of great danger, which Frank mentions to Donnie. I pray that this is merely a work of fiction. If it's not, then I pray for you, the reader of this book. If I'm still alive when the events foretold in these pages occur, then I hope that you'll find me before it's too late. Roberta Ann Sparrow, October 1944. It's interesting that it occurs in 1944 before the advent of the A-bomb, which leads to both the postmodern era and to the intense nuclear damage that could be signified, which could signify a new alternate timeline. So chapter 1, the Tangent Universe, it says, the primary universe is fraught with great peril. War, plague, famine, and natural disaster are common. Death comes to us all. The fourth dimension of time is a stable construct, though it's not impenetrable. Incidents when the fabric of the fourth dimension become corrupted are incredibly rare. If a tangent universe occurs, it will be highly unstable, sustaining itself for no longer than several weeks. So that is the tangent universe. That's the tangent universe of the film. Eventually, it will collapse upon itself, forming a black hole within the primary universe capable of destroying all existence. Chapter 2, Water and Metal. Water and metal are the key elements of time travel. Water is the barrier element for the construction of time portals used as gateways between universes as the tangent vortex. Metal is the transitional element for the construction of artifact vessels. So that is the jet engine that falls from the sky, and we see Donnie having these dreams of an infinite school hallway in a kind of saltwater universe. Chapter 4, and also think of the Gateway Project, of course, the Gateway Project and Stargate, which I just recently covered with Jamie, which ties in, of course, with Geller Kids. Shouts out to all the 60 people watching us live right now. Thank you for joining me here during this Yuletide, and I really appreciate you. Don't forget, you can support me. Help me get more books, and help me by giving me ideas for things to cover in the future. You can drop those in the live chat or in the comments afterwards. Don't forget to leave a comment. Just simply put Algo or put Donnie Darko. Chapter 4, the artifact and the living. When a tangent universe occurs, those living nearest to the vortex will find themselves at the epicenter of a dangerous new world. Artifacts provide the first sign that a tangent universe has occurred, which is the jet engine with no jet attached to it. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate you, homeboy. If an artifact occurs, the living will retrieve it with great interest and curiosity. Artifacts are formed with metal, such as an arrowhead from an ancient Mayan civilization or a metal sword from medieval Europe. Now, it's interesting they bring up the metal sword because Donnie actually brings up the vortex from the solar plexus being the water destiny outline that guides all people in their own vortex, or their own vector, in their own vector. And what was I going to say? Oh, and also he says like a spear. And it's interesting because sparrow, Roberta Sparrow comes from the word spearwa, which is a Middle English, an Anglo-Saxon into Middle English word in terms of its etymology. Artifacts returned to the primary universe are often linked to religious iconography, as their appearance on Earth seems to defy logical explanation. It falls from the sky. It's a Deus Ex Machina, and Donnie actually mentions the Deus Ex Machina by name when he is with Gretchen on the ground and he sees the red car appear, and the guy, the villain who is about to cut his throat says, "Who is that?" And Donnie says, "Deus Ex Machina." It literally occurs. It's the machine which seems to appear to come out of the ether. Divine intervention is deemed the only logical conclusion for the appearance of the artifact, because Donnie also mentions what not if you move in God's channel. Um, and when he's talking to Noah Wiley, they verge on a metaphysical discussion of what time means, because he's saying Noah Wiley posits that you can see your destiny. Donnie says, "How you can see your destiny, but you can see your destiny. I have the ability to see my destiny beforehand. He can see into the future." Noah Wiley says, if this is the case, then it would nullify itself because of the appearance of free will. You would have a choice. And Donnie says, not if you move in God's channel, because God is the master of time. Chapter 6, the living receiver. The living receiver is chosen to guide the artifact into position for its journey back to the primary universe. No one knows how or why a receiver will be chosen. The living receiver is often blessed with a fourth dimensional powers. These include increased strength, the axe into the head of the mongrel, telekinesis, mind control, and the ability to conjure fire and weather, which is why I think it gives a sort of meta symbolism to the fact that Drew Barrymore is in the movie. And also, it should be mentioned that it seems like Jake Gyllenhaal's entire career has been uh, has been an offshoot into a tangent universe of what he did in this film. First of all, he was in the film in October Sky before this, where he's playing a child rocket scientist. There's a jet engine in the film. And then he later goes on to be in films like, first of all, Jim Cunningham says to him, "You're a prisoner." He's in Prisoners. We've covered Prisoners. There's the labyrinthine mind. There's the creeper aspect to the film, which again occurs in Prisoners. There's also Source Code. This Source Code seems to be a sequel to this movie. Source Code was done by, of course, David Bowie's son, and he is in Metal and Ice in that movie, where he is seems to be an Air Force pilot in some sort of MK Ultra experiment, who is thrown into the past through a computer simulation program in order to find out the source of a train carrying a WMD into a city. But in the movie, he inhabits various hosts. So it seems like the movie has a sort of a thematic, there's kind of a thematic exposition here. Chapter 7, the manipulated living. The manipulated living are often the close friends and neighbors of the living receiver. They are prone to irrational, bizarre, and often violent behavior. This is the unfortunate result of their task, which is to assist the living receiver in returning the artifact to the primary universe. The manipulated living will do anything to save themselves from, capital O, oblivion. In insurance trap. My English teacher, my AP English teacher once said that one thing worse than your destiny is, if destiny exists, is oblivion. Seems to play a role now in terms of the analysis of this film, is oblivion. Oblivion is to have no consciousness at all, to never have existed in the first place, to be nothing. To be nothing seems to be the worst. The manipulated dead will set an insurance trap. The living receiver must ensure the fate of all mankind. Chapter 10, the manipulated dead. The manipulated dead are more powerful than the living receiver. If a person dies within the tangent dimension, they're able to contact the living receiver through the fourth dimensional construct. That's Frank. The fourth dimensional construct is made of water. The this is the water main breaking. This is also space. The manipulated dead will manipulate the living receiver using the fourth dimensional construct. Manipulated dead will often set an insurance trap for the living receiver to ensure that the artifact is returned safely to the primary universe. If the insurance trap is successful, the living receiver is left with no choice but to use this fourth dimensional power to send the artifact back in time into the primary universe before the black hole collapses upon itself. And then chapter 12, dreams. When the manipulated awaken from their journey into the tangent universe, they are often haunted by their experience in their dreams. This is the end of the film with the mother. Many of them will not remember. Those who do remember their journey are often overcome with profound remorse for the regretful actions buried within their dreams, the only physical evidence buried within the artifact itself, all that remains from the lost world. Ancient myth tells us of the Mayan warrior killed by an arrowhead that had fallen from a cliff, where there was no army and no enemy to be found. We are told of the medieval knight mysteriously impaled by sword he had not yet built. We are told that these things occur for a reason. So that is, and here's a list of the, okay, so this says the living receivers, Donnie Darko, manipulated dead, Frank Anderson, Gretchen Ross. Okay, so Gretchen Ross, this puts Gretchen Ross as one of the manipulated dead. Manipulated living, Edward Darko, Rose, Elizabeth, Samantha Darko, Catherine Farmer, that's Kitty Farmer, Elizabeth Farmer. Beth Farmer is one of the girls in the Sparkle Motion with Samantha. Let's see. And then we have all the various, basically all the various people within the cast. Okay, so let me look at this. This is Donnie Darko fan site, and I'm gonna read some of this because this is Big Nine coincidences, and I thought this is interesting. It's just a fan site post, but I thought it would be good to look at this. This is right here, and it says Donnie Darko was filmed in 28 days during fall 2000. It was first viewed at the Sundance Film Festival in early 2001. It was scheduled for theatrical release in the U.S., but was delayed for several weeks because a plot, and this is, I covered this at the beginning, and I haven't even read this, a lot of this, but I just wanted to post it because I wanted to read it live. We do it live. We do it live. A plot based on a jet engine crashing into a house was not popular after Big Nine. The Arabic-style font on promo movie posters needed to be changed to Palatino because the perpetrators of Big Nine, so-called, were from the Middle East. I cannot think of a more iconic omen for Big Nine than the slow-motion scene of a jet engine ripping through an upside-down, in distress American flag on the ceiling of Donnie Darko's bedroom ceiling near the end of the movie. It's quite intriguing that this scene was filmed about 1 year before Big Nine. There's also the scene where students waiting for a bus look at each other in dread when they hear the roar of jet engine above them, and when they look up, no plane is visible. Now let's do a more detailed comparison between Donnie Darko and Big Nine, both in respect to the timeline and places of importance. Okay, here we go. You think this is interesting? I think this is pretty wild. You know, and you can be, of course, hesitant and critical of schizoidal interpretations, but the movie is schizoidal about a paranoid schizo, and it sort of leans into this. And also, we can read what we want. We can have our determinations later. All right, Donnie Darko. Based on the first sequence with Frank, the world is in danger of ending when the primary universe and the tangential universe re-intersect at 6:42 a.m. on 11/1/88 as the result of a time-space paradox created by a jet engine that falls through a wormhole into a house in the town of Middlesex, Virginia. At the end of the TU, the engine falls from a commercial airliner flying from LAX to an undisclosed airport in Northern Virginia. That would be, I suppose, it would probably be, it's set in Richmond. But this would be, what's it called? Dulles, which adds a whole other layer to this. Dulles or Reagan International. Note this date is 1 week before the 1988 presidential election, and there are intimations in the movie that Bush and the Republican Party are evil and perhaps false prophets. 1,000 points of light, especially their connections with the moral majority as represented by Kitty Farmer and Jim Cunningham. Now, I'm not sure that is accurate. I think Jim Cunningham and Kitty Farmer are not representative of that. They're actually representative of an interpretation of that. But it's that I see this as valid, but there's some nuance in here. Big Nine, Muhammad Atta enters Logan Airport, Boston at approximately 6:45 to 6:52, confirms the mission is a go. As stated by Rose Darko in a telephone message the night before, Rose and Samantha's fateful flight from LAX to an unidentified airport in Northern Virginia was scheduled to land sometime around 8:30. Let's look at major events around 8:30 on the wiki timeline for Big Nine. 30 minutes before 8:30, American Airlines Flight 11, carrying 81 passengers and 11 crew members, departs 14 minutes late, its destination being LAX. 15 minutes before 8:30, Flight 11 is hijacked, and United Airlines Flight 175 also departs from Logan International in Boston. Its destination was LAX. By the way, I was on that flight, that same flight, a week beforehand. Let's see. Closest to events at 8:30. 15 minutes before 8:30, United Airlines Flight 93 takes off with 37 passengers and 7 crew members from Newark. Flight 170, 842, Flight 175 hijacked. Okay, I'm going to skip the rest of that. Donnie Darko and Big Nine. A Middlesex setting is inferred from Middlesex High School and other references to the town or county. There are multiple Middlesexes, but this is a fictional town in Middlesex County. Middlesex County is not in Northern Virginia, even though it says it is. This is further supported by the assertion of a 26-year-old director, Richard Kelly, that the film setting is based on his teen life outside of Richmond, Virginia. Outside of Richmond, Virginia is Midlothian. The final party, Donnie's Last Supper, is before the time loop closes in celebration of Elizabeth Darko's acceptance into Harvard, while Darko parents are conveniently out of town. The dad is in NYC, presumably on business, which is weird in the film that he just disappears. Kitty Farmer couldn't go. She had to defend Jim Cunningham after the dungeon was discovered in his house by firemen putting out the blaze. Samantha and Rose board a red-eye flight. This says 2806, gate 42, departing at 12. See, they're on the plane that will lose the jet engine that Donnie will report in an act of self-sacrifice, resolving the paradox. This party is critical to the setting, the insurance trap for Donnie, and sets up the movie's Deus Ex Machina, Gretchen's, and Frank's sudden deaths. A drunken Frank needs to make his beer run, and which, remember, he made a beer run. It says it on the fridge, and Roberta Sparrow needs to be in the road in front of her mailbox in her perpetual vigil for Donnie's letter that finally arrives at the precise time to make Frank's car swerve, running over Gretchen, which in turn causes Donnie to shoot Frank. Remember, also in the film, Donnie is thankful that he got to meet, that the school flooded, and she says, why? And he says, because otherwise this conversation never would have happened, and then he never would have really met Gretchen. They had met in the classroom when she sat next to him, but they hadn't really met, and then they start to, he says, you want to go with me? The only other place names in the movie are Sarasota Heights Golf Course, owned by false prophet Jim Cunningham, who is at least indirectly tied to the Republican Party and moral majority, and Kitty Farmer, the Washington Redskins FedEx Field, which would be RFK Stadium. You remember that used to be RFK Stadium, where the Redskins played. That leads to him to the gun and the Aero Theater, where the classic final conversation between Frank and Donnie takes place. The latter has an obvious connection with the airplane theme, but no specific spatial reference. However, since the film was made in Southern California based on comments in the director's cut, we know this is the Aero Theater in Santa Monica. What else? Let's see. So some other place names, big non-place names. Dulles Airport, possible destination of Elizabeth and Samantha Darko. Let's see. LAX, destination of all 3 big 9 flights that hit the target. I'm not sure if that's true. San Francisco, destination of aborted flight UA93. No Donnie Darko connection. He's in New York. The dad is in New York. Yo, shouts out to David Patrick Harry right there. Church of the Eternal Logos. Merry Christmas, BLA and chat. Hey, Merry Christmas to you, sir. Really appreciate you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you and Jenny. Let's see. Sarasota, Florida. President George W. Bush reading to an elementary school students. My pet goat. Remember that? My pet goat. Big 9. Trade. Big 9. Airplane. Remember that? Fucking weird. Let's see. Note that the only Donnie Darko connections are with the flights that hit their intended targets and the location of Bush. There are no connections with the passenger aborted 93 attack. There's a complete list of the geo-reference places and place names mentioned in the movie, some of which you really have to pay close attention to. All the key locations are directly associated with Big 9. And it ends with more than coincidence, much better than Nostradamus. And so that's it. So that's it for that one. Let's look at a possible reference to 2002 in Donnie Darko. Okay, so this is the one with the time the crash sequences in the film. Donnie Darko, the film, features a recurring scene consisting of fast cut composition of various overlaying elements atop a large pupil. One of these elements appears to be a stacked trace core dump for some kernel. Okay, so let me show you that right here. So that is, let's see, that would be this one. Let's see, that would be this one right. Yeah, that would be this one right here. Okay, this is what I'm talking about in the director's cut, and I really, really went hard schizo into all this. So this shows, upon taking a closer look, I discovered the following frame. The image doesn't show very clearly, but the most important text is copied below. And the text copied below here, I'll put the link in the chat for you so you can deep dive into this yourself. If you know anything about code, please put it in the comments after the movie. So this says, kernel version, Latwin kernel version 6.1, Friday, September 6th, 23.931, PDT 2002, root. Aside from the obscure Latwin kernel, which I can't find any info on, looks like an Apple-based system, though. The date, Friday, September 6th, is of higher relevance below. To my knowledge, the movie was produced in 2001, and the frame itself was taken from the director's cut. Turns out the director's cut was released in 2004, but it does seem strange to have added scenes post-final cut that were produced between the actual release and the director's cut. Does the kernel dump appear in the original theatrical release? No, it doesn't. Is the year 2002 here meant to be some reference to the future? Though in contrast to the 1988 setting, it does seem quite irrelevant, or am I overthinking it? Here's the Latwin kernel, would be nice too. And let's see. Here's what I could find out. I'm going to say this is specific to the director's cut of the film. The site goes second by second, describing the changes between the original and the director's cut. Here they introduce the I that's completely added to the director's cut. After the dawn of the new day, via text, 210-88, via text insert, the DC features a long sequence of black screen with threatening sound effects until eventually Frank's ghost voice announces, "Wake up." After that, we see a close-up of an eye with an expanding pupil. Then for a millisecond, Frank's rabbit head is cut in like in Fight Club. The transition shot of the Darko's house is much longer in the DC too. From now on, the eye always symbolizes the tasks and abilities which get implanted by Frank. So this is essentially, this is like 12 Monkeys. Yes, we get the subliminal scene like in Fight Club, and we get the water. We also get Watership Down, and the bunny in Watership Down the rabbit thrown into one of the scenes with quick subliminal message. But we see sequences of, these are like, this is very MK Ultra. We get programming sequences of wake up, the eye opening. We get sounds of thunder. There's water crashing there, and there are fireworks going off, which seem to be like programming cues mixed in with a kind of 12 Monkeys type of simulation, deja vu, the movie Deja Vu, Tony Scott. Richard Kelly worked with Tony Scott, thrown into the host here. So this shows a nearly identical image to your screen capture and states there are 7 extra seconds. The eye again, this time accompanied by a countdown from the off. Does the content mean anything? So what does the content mean, if anything? Well, it turns out it doesn't really mean anything here. It says here's the actual content of a similar era, which is the Darwin kernel version 6.1. It seems that someone found this Mac OS 10.3X error text and decided to use it for graphics. They did make the choice to change Darwin to Latwin to avoid clashing with Apple's litigation team, so the content and date mentioned here have nothing to do with the film. But the whole point is not that. The whole point is that aesthetically it works towards a server crash, which would be the brain sequence from either the future or a simulation or a literal time jump through a portal with Frank as going into his host, Donnie. Let's look at this is from Hero Magazine. This is Decoding Donnie Darko, and this is partly with an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal. This says, let's let's see. Donnie Darko is an enigma in the sense that its message can be interpreted differently by the individual viewer. That's certainly true. Set in the 1980s, the film taps into a number of intriguing themes and genres, from teenage angst to melancholic science fiction through dark humor. Donnie Darko also, I mean, it is interesting how it sort of pops into later, even music themes. We have Tears for Fears and Echo and the Bunnyman, again, the Bunnyman, and the Killing Moon. The movie takes place really over a lunar cycle, and we have Donnie Darko appearing as Johnny from Karate Kid, which later appears in terms of the album cover for Saturdays Equals Youth by M83, which again gives a kind of provenance to the nostalgic and future aspects of the film. The brainchild of first-time writer and director Richard Kelly, Donnie Darko has become an iconic cult classic, but not without strife. Upon the film's initial release in 2001, it was considered a flop at the box office due to distribution and social factors. But it has become a huge boom. It boomed when it came to midnight releases, cult classic status, and especially with release in the UK, where they released in the UK. They loved it in the UK. I was there when it happened, and really filtered back into the United States. And the DVD sales really went off the charts. But this has contributed to Richard Kelly's not really doing much, or not being able to do much in the film industry. Again, I have a friend who worked on The Box. The Box, again, is set in Richmond. Deals with NASA themes because Richard Kelly's dad was a NASA contractor working on the Viking landing, the Viking rover, Mars Viking rover at Langley Air Force Base. And she basically told me that, because she knows Richard Kelly, and she basically said the problem is in Hollywood, it's pretty this seems pretty obvious, is that Donnie Darko ended up getting so much. It was so successful in the cultural zeitgeist, and it really did do something that changed Hollywood in a number of ways. I mean, you have a first-time director who has a bunch of first-time people around him and really writes something completely original, and it changed the way that we were looking at teen movies in the 90s. And again, that's one of the things that I was turned off from when I first saw the trailer. I thought, is this going to be another teen movie? Then I saw it, and I realized this is not it at all. This was something completely new. And basically, it had so much surrounding the movie, and that ended up going into the movie, that if that happens, what will happen to a filmmaker is that they will be flooded with money and production and all of these assets that they didn't have before in making the original film. So the original distinct vision of a work of art gets destroyed in a sense by too much at hand. So in other words, like, in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last movie. Well, if your last movie was in 2001 or 2001, and then we had Big Nine occur, which is a kind of Deus Ex Machina that occurs through the Deus Ex Machina of the movie, then there's too much that you're able to access, and that can destroy creativity. And it certainly can destroy financing of a movie. And I guess he hadn't been able to make another. I mean, he did The Box, and The Box was a good movie, but there are too many resources, and there's too much involved, and so then it ruins the vision that you had, and the kind of, it's like when they say that in order to be if you want to be a writer, if you really want to write the great novel, the great American novel, or the great English, if you want to write a novel, or you want to write something great, you have to be in a miserable place. You have to be usually in somewhere cold, or somewhere totally windswept, or somewhere where all of your creativity, all of your creative vision is insular. And so the outlet becomes the page. Very rarely are great books actually written or composed in paradise idyllic settings. It just doesn't work. Now Hemingway, of course, lived in Key West, but by that point, he'd already written these great works. And we've done a couple of Hemingway streams. And I totally changed my mind on Hemingway, by the way. You remember that when we did For Whom the Bell Tolls. We did For Whom the Bell Tolls. We did In Our Time. We did a few Hemingways. But there's too much, there's too much Pacific, too much placid, too much idyllic atmosphere on the outside in order to channel the fire of creativity that goes into writing on a page. This says, could you talk about let's see, this is about how this lady, Laura Page, got involved with the film. Let's see, how was it about the script that you found compelling? Okay. First of all, it was a very tightly written script. It was not the typical script of the first-time writer. It was an accomplished piece of work. Second of all, the story, it was the first high school story I'd seen in that dark vein, despite the fantastical stuff that's in it. It takes a very direct, deep look at what it took to be that age to go to high school. Let's see. I'm going to skip to some of the more meaty bits of this interview. The connection between visuals and sounds are incredibly powerful. How closely related were these attributes before the creation? Pretty closely related, she says. The famous scene that people talk about a lot was the opening of the school. It was a contentious set of circumstances. Richard wanted to do that from the bus into the school, out to the backyard, back into the school, and into the classroom within one shot. We all knew that was unrealistic in that sense. The producers came to me and said, you have to tell him no. I said, well, my ammo is not to tell a director no. My ammo is to tell a director what it will take, how they can do it, and help the director make the decision, yes or no. This is the director of photography here. The director of photography was great because he explains in Deus Ex Machina, the making of Donnie Darko, that he said first day when he met Richard Kelly, let's get something straight. Like, I'm a lot older than you, but let's just pretend we're the same age. Which it sounds like a kind of Hollywood, thing. Oh, it's a brave decision, but it's actually pretty cool. And he said, my job is, I'm not going to tell him what's possible and what's not possible. I'm going to tell him how we can make the thing that you want possible in terms of actual logistical filmmaking. Are there any messages translated through props, costume, and scenery that the audience may be unaware of? I kind of don't think so, in the sense it was very clear. For instance, the rabbit was something that in prep we were kind of anticipating. It says in the script, a rabbit, a bunny, a rabbit. It came to us with these drawings of what the rabbit was going to be. We all freaked out, and the production designer, the costume designer, and myself all said, no, this isn't right. This isn't a rabbit. This is something else. He insisted he was absolutely right from the beginning, that was the original drawing, and that's exactly what it ended up being. None of us believed in it. We thought, this is going to be terrible. You can't do something like this. But he insisted on it. In fact, he was so right that I've never questioned those decisions. He has the ability to make those decisions and make them well, and I go along with him now. The film has a memorable, dark, and grainy quality. Could you tell me about the method and mentality behind this? Grain is part of my style. The guy says, I like the texture and random movement of film grain. My own still photography uses that as an element of technique, so that was always part of my thinking. Richard wanted to shoot the movie with anamorphic lenses, the difference between flat lenses, wide lenses, and anamorphic lenses. And he wanted to shoot with anamorphic lenses. I wasn't opposed to that, but they're not as sensitive as a regular lens, and it takes twice as much light to use anamorphic. The perception is that it's slower to work that way, so once again, one of the producers says to me, you have to tell him you can't do that. I kind of improvised this. I said, well, let me explain something to you. Kodak has just developed a new film stock that it's very high-speed film stock, and if I use that, it can eliminate the deficit of needing more light because of the format of anamorphic is wide and narrow. I would be able to put lights on the ceiling in the living room, in the house, and in the kitchen. It would actually make it easier to accomplish the lighting in this scene. And they agreed, but it was total BS. I did do those things, but it wasn't why I said that. In fact, in using this film stock, for anybody technical, was 800 ASA, so it was a very sensitive stock and very grainy, but as I say, that is part of my taste anyway, so I don't mind it. I got around the producers by telling them it was more cost-effective to use the film that I wanted to use, the lens Richard wanted to use, and the style we wanted to achieve, so it accomplished quite a bit. It was actually a lot of fun to do it that way. Let's see. And let's go into, why do you think Donnie Darko is such an iconic cult film? There's an honesty about how shitty high school really is, and at any age of student that doesn't really relate to that movie, I can almost anywhere in the world say, how many of you have seen Donnie Darko? And all hands will go up. And that's 15 years ago. It's an honest film and very honest. It feels very real and exposed, and it goes deep into Donnie's psyche. Jake was okay. Let's look at this next one because this is Donnie. Okay, this is Donnie Darko takes inspiration from a Virginia urban legend. This is pretty interesting. So I'll copy and paste this one. That last one wasn't great. That wasn't a great article. That was just filmmakers talking logistics. But let's look at this one. All right, this is Donnie Darko inspiration. Richard Kelly's 2001 cult horror film Donnie Darko remains a strange yet thoughtful film about fate over 20 years after its original release. Fate and free will. The film follows the story of Donnie as he attempts to uncover strange time travel phenomenon after a plane engine crashes into his bedroom. The Commonwealth of Virginia is one of America's oldest, filled with extensive history and beautiful landmarks. A state like Virginia is also home to many myths and urban legends, including its most famous legend of the Bunny Man Bridge, which is directly referenced throughout Donnie Darko. But what exactly is the Bunny Man Bridge? Okay, here we go. Legend behind Bunny Man Bridge. The urban legend of the Bunny Man and Bunny Man Bridge has been around for several decades. I've never heard this, and I've lived here almost my entire life, except for when I lived in New York for a year, and when I lived in Memphis for a year, when I lived in Europe for 5 years. The urban legend of the Bunny Man and Bunny Man Bridge has been around. Starting in the 1970s, people began seeing the Bunny Man in horrifying situations. While there are lots of varying details to the story, the legend remains the same at its core. According to the legend, a man dressed in a bunny costume would appear under a bridge in Fairfax County, Virginia, brandishing an axe or a similar weapon and attacking people. I put it on that screen so it doesn't freeze here because this has lots of pop-ups on it. Rumors of Bunny Man Bridge vary from person to person, but there are many recorded anecdotes of the incidents. The major consistencies are the location, now known as Bunny Man Bridge, which is about 2 hours north of me, turning urban legend into Virginia's own spooky Halloween story. Okay, how does Donnie Darko connect to the Bunny Man Bridge? Donnie Darko connects a unique horror story with the Commonwealth of Virginia and its most famous urban legend. Throughout the film, Donnie experiences daylight hallucinations with an ominous figure dressed up in a bunny suit called Frank, giving him clues about the near future and Donnie's fears. Frank tells him that the world will end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds. That is when the world will end, which coincidentally is on Halloween in the film. Not coincidental, it's a coincidence. At Donnie Darko's suspenseful climax, Frank is revealed to be a real person. He accidentally runs over Donnie's girlfriend Gretchen with his car and kills her on Halloween night. It fulfills the legend of the Bunny Man, but ends up being killed by a heartbroken Donnie. Donnie then decides to reverse time by being killed by a stray airplane engine, saving both Gretchen and Frank. Donnie Darko's link to Virginia and its mythology is not a mere coincidence. Richard Kelly is originally from the state, growing up outside the capital in Midlothian, just outside, about 15 minutes outside of Richmond. I mean, it's pretty much a Richmond suburb. His perspective as someone from a smaller Virginia town informs the film's setting in Middlesex, Virginia, although the film was actually shot in Los Angeles. Let's see. There are many horror films based on real-life events and true stories. While the validity of urban legends like the Bunny Man Bridge is up for debate, it certainly doesn't discourage the potential for those myths to inspire new stories. All right, now let's look at... Is there anything in this one? A storm is coming. Okay, this is the poem. This last one, this is the... I'm definitely keeping like just a pop-up on here. There's a poem that Donnie reads in the director's cut. And this is interesting because this seems to be the mantra that he uses or his thematic plot focus in terms of his superhero arc. He says, this is Donnie's poem. A storm is coming, Frank says, a storm that will swallow the children, and I deliver them from the kingdom of pain. I will deliver the children back to their doorsteps. I'll send the monsters back to the underground. I'll send them back to a place where no one else can see them except for me because I'm Donnie Darko. That's the weird poem that he reads in the film, and this is so interesting because I think it's cut out of the director's cut. It's in the theatrical cut, and it really is amazing. Now, I included an analysis of Graham Greene's The Destructors in the original analysis that I did with Jim Bob, and The Destructors deals with it's a 13-page short story by Graham Greene. I also covered Graham Greene when I covered The Quiet American, his novel. Graham Greene was a SIS British agent, like a number of the writers that we've covered, who ended up writing novels that were. Remember that what's his name? What's his name in the Plumbers? Hunt. Howard Hunt. Remember Howard Hunt wrote novels? I've got one of his novels here, Cozumel. A lot of times, CIA or MI6 agents will write novels because they are parallel versions of real or true of it. They're true. They end up being truer than factual events in terms of special ops. And and Graham Greene wrote the story about being a child though in The Destructors, where these kids burn down a house and with a grandma death character, but it's a man, and they find money in the mattress. This is in the film, and they end up setting fire to it anyway because, as Donnie says in the film, destruction can be an act of creation, and it's ironic. This is sort of the Michael Caine way of looking at things with the Joker in Batman. You know, some people just want to watch the world burn. So remember that Kitty Farmer says, I think all of us have seen Bonanza because there's an actor named Graham Greene. But anyway, the point is that he is creating by destroying in the film because he is destroying the Creeper Palace in order to let the children live who can create. And this also ends up with him destroying his temporary timeline and himself so that the other characters can live. It's really a form of self-sacrifice in here. Now, there's obviously something to be said for the film in terms of its Gnostic paradigm, which we really went into last time, so I'm not really going to cover here. But Donnie seems to be a kind of liberating angel for this in terms of that paradigm for the film. But I think that my analysis this time really concerns the fact that Donnie does seem to be the superhero that we need now. If we don't need another hero, but he certainly is one that we can admire for his Jim Cunningham aspect. And also Jim Cunningham, he's cunning. He's a cunning man. He is cunning and is fear-inducing and terror-inducing in the film, and he's a wolf in plain sight, right, hiding amongst the sheep. And so the film takes on a whole nother aspect. I think this also is just as valid as the sim theory. I heard that Richard Kelly once explaining his own movie, which never seems to, you know, whenever you have the artist explaining the movie, it never matches up. But it was interesting that he said that the internet has really kind of come to many conclusions about simulation theory in the movie. Now, simulation is bullshit, but in terms of the film, the life of the film, it seems to be a kind of 12 Monkeys, where a character is going back in time to inhabit a host in order to change a tangential universe time loop, which is indicated again by the crash screens, the crash server screens, and the execute, and that those occur when Donnie crashes out of his altar and at the end of the film. So anyway, that's Donnie Darko. You guys, what do you think? If you would like to leave a comment afterwards explaining what you think Donnie Darko is about or what you think is the best interpretation, please let me know. Hey, yo, shouts out to the real John Connor right there. Ace of Bazed, John Connor, big-time supporter, my friend. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you to everybody who's here tonight. Love you all. Thank you so much. Hey, John Connor sends $10 and says, Merry Christmas. Love you, brother. Hey, love you too. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, man. That helps a lot. Thank you. Shouts out to, QW right there, who drops $5 on PayPal. Red Bull funds for an analysis better than the phrase cellar door. Thank you so much, QW. Really appreciate you. Thanks to Jason, who drops me $10 on PayPal. Thank you so much. You are the man. Let's see if we got any other support here for, if we got any super chats. If you want to drop a super chat, through the links provided, you still have time. I really appreciate the direct links, especially because they will help me to get where I need to go for Christmas. I'm leaving tomorrow night, and I'm going. So it would really, really help me. I'm going to see my family, thank goodness. So if you want to support me here directly, I would really appreciate that. That helps me so much. Also helps me to get books. So let's see. Shouts out to OBG again, who drops $20 super chat. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you to Mella, who dropped $10 again. Thank you so much. And hold on, go away. Hold on, go away, thing. Go away. No away. Nope, go away. Ugh. No, go out of there. Okay, and shouts out to Real John Connor, who just dropped that, who grabbed a membership. If you want to grab a membership, that also helps me a lot. I'll be back with another member stream very soon. And also, I will be back with an analysis of Charles Perrault's fairy tales. So I recently was talking about this when I covered the book Sons of Cain, which is the history of the serial killers. But also, I want to look into part of the reason for the channel, of course, like we always said, is looking at source material for a lot of the things that we see in the cultural zeitgeist, the cultural sphere, and of course, as mentioned by celebrities and politicians, or really anyone in academia, anyone who alludes to classic literature and is usually wrong in their allusion. So we're going to look at the classic fairy tales and how that can inform some of our analyses in terms of symbolism and archetypes. Shouts out to my friend Luke out there, because in January we're planning on, he's doing a massive analysis of J.G. Frazier's The Golden Bough, and I'll be doing one chapter of that with him. Shouts out to my friend Toby Harvard out there, who is a filmmaker, and I really appreciate. And I think you guys we should continue watching movies, continue reading books, and right after this, I will be watching Toby's latest film, which is called Bookworm. It's got Elijah Wood. I will be watching that. It's already paid for. The whole family's going to watch it. My dad paid for it, so we're going to watch. We all have the account, so we're going to watch that. And I'm watching it as soon as it has become available. So there you go. So I suggest everybody watch that film and support our friends and people we know in the things that they're doing. Shouts out to Toby out there. Love you, brother. Everybody out there, I hope everyone has a great December, great Yuletide, great winter time, the great Christmas time, and stay safe out there. Stay good with your family and friends. Man, there's a lot happening, but we're going to be good. We're going to be good. All this stuff happens. Hey, shouts out to Toledo out there, who gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Toledo. Really appreciate you. You are the best. I love you so much. And listen, you guys, you like my new hoodie? You like my new hoodie? You like my new Unsolved Mysteries hoodie? Shouts out to the gifter. You know who you are out there. Love you. Everybody out there, let's be good. Keep reading books. Keep praying. Keep reading books. Talking to your family and friends. Call your friends. Stay cozy and warm in this wintertime. Shouts out to all of our friends and family, especially Rachel and Andy out there, who are just doing so well. Jamie and Jay. Everybody out there, really appreciate you. And listen. Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough, let's go to Rooks G. Let's go to Rooks G and hear some Rooks G. Shouts out to our friend Rooks G, who's always making great music. This is called The Welcoming. Again, you can support me. Please think about supporting me. Please hit those direct links. You can do those anytime on the video description, in the channel description. Hit me up with an email, madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. Give me some ideas. Help to fund me as I try to get my books published, because I want to get them out there for me and for you, to the glory of God. But for you, I want you to read them. Shouts out to everybody out there. I love you all. I couldn't make it to Maddie's stream this week, our friend Digital Minefield. Please go back and watch his stream from this week. Digital Minefield. Couldn't make it because I was at the hospital. I really hated missing that, because I love our friend Maddie. He's the best. That's it, you guys. I love you. We do it live. Here we go. Here's Rooks G with The Welcoming. Cheers.